What is going on, everybody? In today's video, we are hopping right into a 12-team full PPR mock draft for the 2024 fantasy football season. In today's video, we will be going round by round, going over a draft strategy for drafting from the 1.6 overall. If you guys need to see a video from anywhere between the 1.1 and the 1.5, I'll have all of those linked down below. Plus, we have tons of real fantasy football drafts that I've been doing on live streams on the channel, as well as more subscriber mock drafts that I've been doing live on the channel that you guys can check out as well. For the purpose of today's video, like I said, I'll be going round by round, going over what players I would be targeting, what strategy I would be implementing if I was drafting from the 1.6, what players I like, all of that good stuff so that you guys can be as prepared as possible going into the 2024 fantasy football season. If you guys are new to the channel, this is all we do here all year long: free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to hit that subscribe button on the way in. But let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into today's video. All right, so drafting from the 1.6 overall, I really don't think you need to overthink this selection. Go with the best available wide receiver or running back in your mind from this spot, period. So a little bit of a different draft here. We see three wide receivers go off of the board and then Christian McCaffrey, but you're not going to see Christian McCaffrey at the 1.6. You're going to be looking at players in that tier: wide receiver, JJ, Amon-Ra, or Jamar Chase. I think any of those guys are perfectly fine here. Then I think the two running backs left, Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson, perfectly fine as well. For the purpose of this mock, we will go with Breece Hall at the running back position to start this draft. Like I said, you want to start with a wide receiver, that's completely fine. If you want to go running back, Bijan, also completely fine. What we'll do when we come back to the 2.7 is take a look at what available wide receivers are there. It's really kind of, one of my favorite strategies is to do what I call a bounce back strategy and go between the running back and the wide receiver position, or vice versa. If I start with a wide receiver in the first round, then in the second round, I will go with a running back, and vice versa, right? If I go Breece Hall in the first, then I'm going to go wide receiver at the 2.7. But 2.7 is kind of an odd spot where I do feel like you're at the kind of end of a tier of the running back position that just won't come back to you. And you're kind of breaking into the next tier of wide receiver in that area that maybe doesn't feel as strong. So we'll kind of sit back and see who's available there. But at the end of the day, I do think there's a lot of value, like I said, in going double hero running back if you get a player like CMC, Bijan, or Breece, and you're able to land a player in the second round at the position that you feel brings that high amount of upside to the table. So the guys I would look at that are left or might be available in this range would be Kyron Williams, Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, and Travis Etienne to a degree, as well as Isaiah Pacheco for me. When we look at the available wide receivers, you got Olave, Ayuk, Mike Evans, Nico Collins. This tier is fine. You got guys like Deebo Samuel, Waddle, DJ Moore, but I just think going for that kind of high ceiling, whether it's Derrick Henry or Devon Achane here, pairing that RB2 with an RB1, going double hero running back brings a ton of value to your overall roster. So we will start things off with Breece Hall and Derrick Henry here. Derrick Henry is the running back in this tier that I feel the best about. I like Devon Achane, love the high ceiling that he brings to the table. I think Etienne's going to be perfectly fine this year. Don't mind him here. And yes, I'm okay with quote unquote reaching for Isaiah Pacheco in this range as well. But for me, Isaiah Pacheco, I think is as good as anyone who's on the board in terms of the running back position for the most part here. So moving into the third round, fourth round, fifth round, what we're going to do now is just attack that wide receiver position. We are not even going to think about running back for like double-digit rounds at this point. We're going to load up at wide receiver. And don't get me wrong, I think all the wide receivers who you see gone in the first, super high value, and all those guys, definite argument going any of those players, of course, over any running backs in the first round, hands down. Second round wide receivers, all perfectly fine. I like all the names that are on the board at the moment as well. But I will say there's so much value in the third, fourth, and fifth round at the wide receiver position currently in drafts, not just mock drafts, but at this point, our community has done a couple actual drafts and just continuously seen so much value at wide receiver in those three rounds. And then there's even wide receiver value that I personally like in the sixth and seventh round. So we're just going to attack the position, go with the best available wide receivers on the board for the 3.6, 4.7, 5.6, and then we'll kind of see who's available at the 6.7. That's going to kind of determine what we do at that point in the draft. So moving into the 3.6, we're looking at a tier of Ayuk, Diggs, Waddle, DJ Moore, Pittman, Cup. I mean, frankly, I'm okay with any of these guys here. I think Brandon Ayuk, like going this late, is going to end up being a steal. I mean, if Ayuk is back with the Niners, which at this point it looks like he's going to be, I don't mind drafting him as a wide receiver one, especially on a kind of build like this. And there he goes. But for me, Waddle, Moore, Cup, any of these guys are fine. The player that I've been drafting the most of this offseason is DJ Moore. I mean, I know Keenan Allen's in this offense now. I know Rome Odunze's there. DeAndre Swift's going to catch some passes. You still got Cole Kmet. But for me, with what we've already seen out of Caleb Williams in the preseason, I still feel like DJ Moore is going to be the guy, and he's going to be able to benefit from that good play that we're seeing out of Caleb Williams so far. I think this Bears offense is going to be fine. DJ Moore, one of my most drafted players going into last year, and where he goes in drafts right now, I still absolutely love his value. Finished as the wide receiver 6 last year, and him and Justin Fields had a great chemistry, great connection. But like I said, Caleb Williams at the quarterback position, I'm not worried about DJ Moore whatsoever. So, yeah, you might be kind of looking at a wide receiver one if you go with a double hero running back strategy here that maybe you don't have like the utmost confidence in. You're not going to feel as good about it, maybe like in comparison to Chris Olave, Devontae Adams in the second, or obviously any guys that you see gone in the first round. But I still think we're going to get good enough value, especially in a full PPR league, that we don't need to worry here. So moving ahead to the 4.7, I guarantee we will see quite a few names at wide receiver gone by then, but we'll just kind of sit back and see who's available. Right now, you got Stephon Diggs, Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, George Pickens as the top available wide receivers. So like I said, I don't know if I even expect any of those guys to be there. We'll just kind of sit back and see what happens. Top available running backs, you got James Cook, Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones, James Conner. And so far, we just have one tight end gone and Sam Laporta, no quarterbacks gone thus far. Pretty typical of what you're going to see at the beginning of the 4th round, I think, in most single quarterback redraft formats, regardless if you're playing in like a half PPR or a full PPR format. So there goes Josh Allen. There's your first quarterback. Makes sense. For me, the top targets here are guys that are going to be kind of bona fide number one wide receivers, or just a wide receiver that brings the highest amount of upside to the roster. We want to look for that high target share. So maybe a guy like Zay Flowers, who just got selected because he is the number one option at wide receiver on that team, or a player like Tank Dell, who just has a high ceiling on a week in, week out basis, and that's who we're going to end up selecting here. I'm okay with him as a wide receiver too. Another wide receiver in a position. You look at this offense, right? You got Stephon Diggs there. You got Nico Collins there. You got a good tight end in Dalton Schultz. Good run game with Joe Mixon now there. Obviously, a good quarterback in terms of CJ Stroud, excuse me. But at the end of the day, really what we've seen so far this preseason is that Tank Dell is the player that CJ Stroud looks for first and foremost at the wide receiver position. They just have a kind of a special connection. Throughout the offseason, I've drafted a lot of Nico Collins. I still really like Nico Collins, but Tank Dell at the 4.7, just way too good of a value for us to pass on here. Going to be a high-powered offense. They're going to score a lot of points. And at the end of the day, even if we see games where maybe Diggs, Collins get more targets overall, we're going to see plenty of games where Tank Dell gets the volume that we need in the passing game to be successful here as a wide receiver too. And you never know, maybe he moves down in your roster to the flex position. Upside is way too high. All right, looking ahead to the 5.6. As we start to wrap up the 4th round here, you've got plenty of good options still at the wide receiver position. There goes Amari Cooper, but we still got George Pickens, Keenan Allen, Christian Kirk, Scary Terry, Rome Odunze, Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed, Chris Godwin, all kinds of names here. There's still high value players, especially in full PPR formats. Top available running backs, we got Mixon, Walker, Jones, James Conner, DeAndre Swift. And so far, we now have 2 quarterbacks gone in Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, as well as 2 tight ends gone in Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce. And there goes Trey McBride to make 3 tight ends as we kick off the 5th round. For me, I'm just not worried about the tight end position this year. I'm kind of consistently drafting some of those like bottom tier elite tight ends, Jake Ferguson, Evan Ingram, George Kittle. I think any of those guys can finish as a tight end 3 or better this year. Call me crazy. The draft capital that you have to spend on them is so much cheaper than where you're drafting a Laporta or Kelsey, that I'll kind of target one of those fringe guys. Even Kyle Pitts, I've seen fall to the 7th and 8th round in real drafts. So, like him, sometimes Kincaid falls, but he's still kind of consistently going in the 5th for the most part. But for me, I just don't want to spend that high draft capital on the tight end position. And I do think that if you kind of punt the position, there's still plenty of good value. Goddard, Schultz, Komet, and later in drafts as well. So we're going to go back to the wide receiver position here at the 5.6. I do really like Christian Kirk. Once again, we're going to try and look at players that are going to be the bona fide wide receiver ones on their teams. I think Scary Terry's fine here. I think George Pickens is perfectly fine. Plenty of good options here. Let's go with Christian Kirk because I do think he'll be a kind of target monster going into this season, even with Brian Thomas Jr. there. Calvin Ridley was there last year. Christian Kirk, was perfectly fine. Evan Ingram was still there. Etienne was still there. I definitely can understand at the moment we've got a calf injury to Christian Kirk. He's been kind of resting, not playing in preseason. So if you're worried about that, you prefer a different player there, whether it's Pickens or Terry McLaurin, whoever, perfectly fine. But for now, I'll go ahead and scoop up Christian Kirk. And once again, just not worrying about the running back position. We're absolutely loaded there. We're going to be targeting some lower tier, later round guys. Maybe Zamir White if he comes at the right price, but he's starting to become a more popular name in drafts. But really, anyone from like Zamir White forward, Zamir White, Raheem Mostert, Javonte Williams, even Zach Moss and Austin Eckler. I've drafted Jonathan Brooks in 2 real drafts now because yes, Jonathan Brooks is going to miss time. We know that, but he's a player that you can just throw right on your IR and you just kind of have that nice value for down the stretch later in the season. So I don't mind kind of targeting Jonathan Brooks if you've especially gone heavy at running back earlier. Do really feel like that's a nice kind of high upside play for down the stretch later in the season. But there's plenty other names here. I like Tajay Spears. I like Brian Robinson, Gus Edwards, Jerome Ford, and even Chuba Hubbard going back to the Panthers offense, and Rico Dowdle, Cowboys. Plenty of options if you go double hero running back. Don't feel like you need to target that RB3 even within the next 6 rounds. So up until like round 8 or so, you don't really need to worry about it. You spent really high draft capital on the position already. All right, moving along to the 6.7 for me. Once again, we're going back to the wide receiver position here in a double hero RB strat. So for me, once again, a player that is going to be the bona fide wide receiver one, like a Terry McLaurin, or a player who's going to bring upside to this roster. And the guy who's standing out, who's available right now to me, is going to be Xavier Worthy of the Kansas City Chiefs. And I do think that if you wanted to go like Terry McLaurin, Jaden Reed, Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, if you prefer any of those guys here over Xavier Worthy, if he does fall to the 6-7 here, and he does, that's okay. I'm completely fine with that because you have a high chance of still drafting Hollywood Brown at the 7.6, who, if you want a piece of that Kansas City Chiefs offense and you want to maybe spend a little bit of a cheaper, draft selection on one of those players, Hollywood Brown's going to be the cheapest of these 3 Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers that you see in drafts easily. But obviously, also, you're going to have to be prepared for him to miss a little bit of the regular season, whether it's 1 game, 2 games, 4 games. We'll find out, but it's obviously not going to be a super long time, as this is not an injury to the leg, to the knees, anything like that. This is a shoulder injury. So we'll take Xavier Worthy, though. I think he brings a great amount of upside. You think about the nice kind of mix there we have at wide receiver, 2 number 1 guys in DJ Moore and Christian Kirk, and then 2 guys who just bring really good upside on a week in, week out basis, Tank Dell and Xavier Worthy. The leagues that my community plays in are always double flex formats, which are becoming a lot more common, a lot more popular. So that's what I kind of practice for during these drafts. But these drafts are also going to be very viable if you're just playing in a single flex format as well. So just keep that in mind. And for me, I do want a 4th wide receiver. I want 4 total wide receivers two at the wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 spots, and then 2 at the flex spots as well. But right now, we are looking pretty good here. Brees Hall, Derrick Henry, DJ Moore, Tank Dell, Kirk, and Worthy as we move into the almost the middle of the 7th round already. And this is a point where maybe you could look at that RB3. Like I said, I don't know if we really need to till the 8th round. We could take another wide receiver here, or we could just go ahead and get tight end locked up. We will see if Jake Ferguson's there at 7.6. If he's not, then I think we just go ahead and take a Zamir White or Raheem Mostert. Do not forget that I am still running several streams throughout the week where I am hopping into real 2024 fantasy football drafts on Underdog Fantasy. If you guys don't want to wait any longer to draft 2024 fantasy football teams, you don't have to. Underdog has all kinds of different unique contests that you guys can enter, including their flagship Best Ball Mania, where somebody is going to win up to $1.5 million. This is the best way to prepare for the upcoming fantasy football season. These are the sharpest drafts throughout the offseason. Plus, Underdog already has week 1 NFL pick'ems out where you guys can play in their new streaks format and win up to 1,000x your money. Promo code the catch, the link is down below as well. Get you a first time 50% deposit match up to $250 plus a mystery pick'em that you guys can use towards that streaks up to 1,000x your money. Promo code the catch. Don't forget, when you sign up, we'll get you that first time 50% deposit match on Underdog Fantasy. Jaden Reed also looking like he might be available. Might be too much of a too good of a value for me to pass on. There's also the potential that Christian Watson is available at the 8.7. So a lot of options here. If you prefer Reed, I think Reed is fine. Take Jaden Reed as your first bench wide receiver. He's a great value here. Could go ahead and lock up the tight end position. Looking at the board in front of us, I mean, we've got 2 teams who don't have a tight end. So we'll go ahead and take Jake Ferguson. I like him above Brock Bowers and David Njoku. He goes before those 2 tight ends on Underdog, but here on Sleeper a little bit lower. But like I said, I think Jaden Reed, a great value there at the 7.6. If you want to take him, he's definitely going to go in the next couple of picks. I mean, he's a value, huge value at the 7.9. But like I said, kind of similar to if you want to pass on Worthy at the 6.7 and target, a player like Hollywood Brown, I think we can pass on Jaden Reed there at the 7.9 and target a player like Christian Watson at the 8.7 if we want, or we can wait a little bit later and target Romeo Doubs. So still plenty of Packers exposure that we can get here, not to mention Dontavion Wicks as well. So there goes Zamir White. I think there's a perfectly fine argument for going Zamir White or Raheem Mostert there at the 7.6, as those are the guys in this kind of, let's just say, 7th round tier of running back that I really do prefer. I like Javonte Williams a lot as well. But now, like I said, there's still plenty of good value on a double hero RB team at the position left in this draft. So I think we will potentially target another wide receiver there at the 8.7, hopefully Christian Watson. And then we'll just take 2 running backs in a row. And yeah, if I haven't mentioned it yet, I am not worried about the quarterback position whatsoever in single quarterback leagues at the moment. I'm not spending early draft capital at the position. I don't see any reason to. If Jordan Love were to fall to the right value, Dak Prescott falls, Burrow, Murray, Anthony Richardson, even Stroud, I've seen those guys fall in real drafts, then yeah, I think you can definitely consider it. But, for me, the value that you see in guys like Tua, Jaden Daniels, a combination of Jaden Daniels and Tua or Goff, Trevor Lawrence, I'm just not worried about the position. So a lot of good value here at wide receiver. I mean, you got 3 kind of risky names in Jordan Addison, Hollywood Brown, and D-Hop all sitting there. Then Christian Watson, Jameson Williams, Cortland Sutton. A lot of different plays that could all bring upside to the table. Let's go with Christian Watson. If Mostert or Zamir White fell out here, I think that they're a more valuable pick than Christian Watson because, once again, we can just take Romeo Doubs with that selection probably at the 9.6. But for me, I think we're fine. We get Christian Watson as our first bench player. That's preferably where I want Christian Watson because of the injury history, but I still think he's a great value. Way too much upside if he's fully healthy this season for me to pass on him as a wide receiver 5. So this is a good look at a double hero running back approach. We get Hall and Henry right out the gate. We could have gone Hall A-Chain, Hall ETN, Hall Pacheco, whatever you may prefer. Then we get 4 wide receivers in a row. Like I said, guys that either bring that wide receiver 1 value to the table or guys that give us high weekly upside. And then we really end up with an additional wide receiver who gives us high weekly upside in Christian Watson. Then we also get a great tight end 1 in Jake Ferguson, one of the most undervalued tight ends going into the year. Top 10 tight end last year at the tight end 9 in full PPR. Had the second most red zone targets of any tight end last year, had 5 touchdowns, 761 receiving yards. And this Cowboys passing attack is going to need Jake Ferguson this year. So I love him there at the 7.6. And I mean, I think it kind of worked out too, because I do like David Njoku, but if we tried to push tight end to the 8.7 and Njoku's gone. And for me, this is the kind of the next tier: Brock Bowers, Dallas Goddard, Hawkinson, Schultz, Komet. If you draft Hawkinson, like, you're going to have to throw him on IR and draft someone else anyways. And I just feel like Ferguson and arguably Njoku kind of round out that final kind of tier of tight end that keeps you in kind of the elite area, so to speak. Not to say that Hawkinson can't get there when healthy, but we're not going to be able to bank on that in week 1. All right, so there goes Jonathan Brooks, and that is definitely a player who I was kind of eyeing here as a potential selection. But for me, let's look at a player who has the most potential to be a workhorse running back. There's 2 guys that come to mind for me: Brian Robinson Jr. and Gus Edwards. I know Brian Robinson has Austin Eckler, who gets drafted there at the 9.4, but we've seen more usage out of Brian Robinson so far in the preseason in terms of being like a 3-down back, and then more usage of Austin Eckler in terms of being like a pass catching back, which makes a lot of sense. But the other thing we've seen so far in the preseason for the Washington Commanders' new offense under Cliff Kingsbury is that they are running the football quite a bit. So, there's a point last year where Brian Robinson was on pace. I mean, he literally was a top 10 running back in fantasy football last year. Then a lot of inconsistency, don't get me wrong, kind of towards the end of the year, and also got hurt towards the end of the year. We still had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 double digit finishes. So in over half of the games last year, he scored 10 or more fantasy points. So for an RB3 on an improved offense for this roster, I think he's perfectly fine. Like I said, the next 2 guys we'll kind of take a look at are Gus Edwards and Jerome Ford. Other players who can be kind of just straight up RB1s on their team: Nick Chubb is not going to start the season. Jerome Ford is going to start the season for the Browns. He's one of the best late round value running backs in fantasy football right now. Don't get me wrong, Donta Foreman will probably still get some touches. The neck injury, that looked a little scary in the preseason, ended up being nothing, or in training camp, I guess I should say. And he's already being really involved in some of the preseason games. Donta Foreman could definitely get some goal line work, but I'm not too worried about it. We've seen Pierre Strong get some carries and stuff, but at the end of the day, Jerome Ford, who just got selected there in the 10th round, which is fine. I encourage you guys to target Jerome Ford. He is going to be a great selection in late rounds, and I think a workhorse back. I mean, even when Chubb is ready to come back, they're not going to give Chubb, 15, 20 touches right away. They're going to ease him into things. And like I said, he might miss at least half the season. We don't know at this point. But nonetheless, Jerome Ford knows for the end zone last year, 9 total touchdowns in those starts. So I do like Jerome Ford. But I don't mind if we're able to land Gus Edwards here. And there he goes. So some good selections here in the 10th. That's fine. 2 other names that I like at this point for this roster. And we can take a look here. There's no one who really stands out at wide receiver. Maybe like Curtis Samuel. I think he's fine. But I think as Trey Benson gets selected and then Xavier Leggett, we want to go ahead and take a running back. And for me, it's Chuba Hubbard. Kind of a similar situation to Jerome Ford. We talked a little bit about Jonathan Brooks. I like Jonathan Brooks a lot, but he's a second half play. Lots of upside there, but still a second half play. This offense will be improved this year under new head coach Dave Canales. Do believe that Bryce Young will have an improved sophomore season. Can't get much worse than last year. But similar to Nick Chubb, Jonathan Brooks is not just going to come out the gate and get 12, 15, 20 touches. He's going to be eased into things until he's fully ready to go. And Chuba Hubbard is going to be the RB1 until then. I think he's a perfectly fine RB4 in a double hero RB approach where you start with two absolute studs. And Chuba Hubbard last year, when he became the starter, double digits every game from weeks 12 to week 17. You can look at week 18 if that was a thing in fantasy football, he would have had double digits in that game as well. So I think Chuba Hubbard is one of the best values once again late at the running back position in fantasy football drafts right now. So that gives us 4 running backs on this roster. We got a little bit of depth, and then we've got 5 wide receivers and our tight ends. So Brees Hall, Derrick Henry, DJ Moore, Tank Dell, Ferguson, Christian Kirk, Xavier Worthy, Christian Watson, B Rob, and Chuba. So really, we probably want to get one more running back, one more wide receiver, or you could just go 2 wide receivers here. And then we obviously got to get a quarterback. And there's kind of an argument here. There's, like I said, if you go Jaden Daniels, I kind of like the idea of drafting 2 quarterbacks. If you go Jaden Daniels, you get a nice rookie upside play, rushing upside, all that stuff. He's looked good in the preseason. And then you can get like a pocket passer like Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, whoever it may be, if you're worried about a presumed injury to Jaden Daniels. But honestly, everyone's acting like Jaden Daniels is going to get hurt this year. Like, we're going to see exactly what happened to Anthony Richardson happen to Jaden Daniels. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people feel that way. And really, there's no evidence to support that necessarily. So if you just want to draft Jaden Daniels, I think that's fine as well. I will say if you want Jaden Daniels, you probably have to kind of reach for him. He is a kind of a name in these later rounds that's starting to become more and more popular. So if you want him, he's on the board. You probably do need to take him before one of your league mates does the same. So let's go ahead and get our QB1 though. Let's go Brock Purdy here. I'm still fine with Purdy where he goes and drafts QB6 last year. This offense hasn't changed on paper. You know, maybe the Ayuk situation worries you. Christian McCaffrey is a calf strain. I don't even know if Ricky Pearsall is going to play this year. The way his offseason has gone, he might not seriously be ready for week 1. So I can understand being worried about it, but this is still one of the best offensive systems in the entire NFL. Kyle Shanahan's system is still going to produce a lot of points, and I think everything will be fine. Ayuk will be there. C-Mac's going to be fine. I'm not worried about him at all. And Ricky Pearsall, I mean, first round draft pick. It was looking like a great selection and could add a lot of value to this offense, but we'll see what kind of happens as his rookie season might get off to a slow start. Nonetheless, I'm completely fine with just 4 running backs in a full PPR format, especially if you spent a lot of early draft capital on the position and got guys like Hall and Henry. So, you know, another option there at 11.6 is to go maybe TJ Hawkinson because you can just throw him right on the IR, then hit the waiver wire for probably a wide receiver who didn't get drafted. You know, there's a lot of good wide receivers not getting drafted even in 12-team formats right now. Guys like Demario Douglas sometimes goes undrafted. Michael Wilson, Randall Robinson, Demarcus Robinson. Maybe you prefer Jordan Whittingham looking at the Rams, whoever it may be. There's enough options that you can just go ahead and throw him on the IR. So he's perfectly fine to select as well. All right, there goes Jaden Daniels at the beginning of the 12th. Caleb went right at the end of the 11th. So, like I said, if you want Jaden Daniels, you probably do need to target him. If he was there at the 12.7, I would take him, but I'm also fine just getting Purdy. And you kind of look at the board right now, like if we reached quote unquote for Jaden Daniels at 11.6, then right now you probably still have Tua and Jared Goff there. The combination of quarterback there, I think, is completely fine. So really, looking at available players, I think the best way to end this draft is to probably just go with the 2 best available wide receivers and end this. We could get another quarterback in Tua, but I just don't really think there's any reason to. I think we can just rock with Brock Purdy and play the waiver if we absolutely need to, but I don't think we'll really have to necessarily do so. But let's take Josh Downs here. I do like his value right now. I mean, you know, he's going to miss time. Definitely doesn't feel good, but at the same time, I think in full PPR, he holds a lot of good value. Look at the available names: Mike Williams, Gabe Davis, Jalen Polk, Troy Franklin, Thielen. I don't really feel great about any of those guys, but I do feel good about Josh Downs when he comes back into the swing of things. Then we'll just target another late round wide receiver like Demario Douglas, maybe Michael Wilson, whoever you kind of prefer in this range. I do like Demarcus Robinson, although Jordan Whittingham has really started to come onto the scene for the Rams. You could go with another tight end potentially. Luke Musgrave, Ben Sennett, I guess are fine. Um, I do think you can still consider Tua or Jared Goff, maybe Herbert or Trevor Lawrence. But like I said, I just don't know if there's any real reason to do so. If you want to take just a pure handcuff running back or rookie running back to end this draft, I think that's fine too. So, I mean, kind of in a position here at the end of the 13th round where we can do really whatever we want, take a player at any position, which is never a bad feeling. But I think knowing that Josh Downs is going to miss some time, and then like we also have a kind of injury prone type player in Christian Watson, we probably just want to draft another wide receiver here to end this draft, even if it's kind of a flyer pick, so to speak, here. So I prefer Demario Douglas here, but I would go with Demarcus Robinson if he's there, for example, as well. Darnell Mooney is another name that I like in this range. I think's fine. You could always take a shot on a rookie like Jermaine Burton or Malachi Corley. I do like Michael Wilson, like I said. There's plenty of names. This is one of those tiers of wide receiver where it's like kind of pick your poison. Whoever you like is fine. There's an argument for just about all of these guys. So I will say if Rico Dowdle fell to the 11.6, I would have selected Rico Dowdle over Brock Purdy. I do think that he's kind of the last running back in that tier there that I think brings enough value to the board that he's worth selecting. Player that could be an RB1 for the Cowboys, or at least see enough playing time, even if Zeke is truly the RB1 there, has that upside that we're looking for at this point in the draft. That as an RB5, I think he's definitely worth the selection. But in these type of formats, single quarterback, full PPR, if you just have four running backs, don't freak out. I think it's perfectly fine. You want to get that depth at wide receiver. You want a viable quarterback and tight end. And you've already, in this double hero running back strategy, spent that high draft capital on two absolute studs in running back, anyways. Those are going to be your starters for the season. All right, so here's a final look at the roster: Purdy, Hall, Henry, Moore, Dell, Ferguson, Christian Kirk, Xavier Worthy. That is a beautiful starting lineup. Then on the bench, Christian Watson, Josh Downs, Demario Douglas as our final wide receivers. Then Brian Robinson and Chuba Hubbard for a little bit of added depth at running back. Perfect team here. Great look at what a double hero running back strategy might look like from the 1.6 overall going into the 2024 fantasy football season. So this team, I think, turned out just about as good as you could possibly get from the 1.6 overall. Like I said, throughout the draft, different players that we could have gone with at different points. Maybe you guys prefer some different wide receivers throughout this draft, or some different late round running backs, maybe a different quarterback. But at the end of the day, I think this is a very good look at what might entail from the 1.6 overall if you go to double hero running back strategy. So if you guys need to see a video from the 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, or the 1.5, I'll have all of those linked down below. Check out all the live streams that we have on the channel. We have all kinds of mock drafts, all kinds of real 12-team underdog drafts for the 2024 season already done on the channel. So whatever you guys need, check out the channel. We got all kinds of videos, short stuff to get you prepared for the upcoming season. If you guys are new to the channel, I'll ask that you guys hit that subscribe button on the way out. If you guys have any fantasy football questions, redraft, dynasty, or best ball, drop them down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.